Hi,
hmm
Darren. Welcome. We're so glad to have you here. This event is part of a new series we launched called Konudan Bağımsız in Turkish, which literally means independent of the topic. Also plays on the word independent to highlight the spirit behind it.
Cool.
This is the first event of the series, and even more excitingly, it's also the first ever event of IGDA Istanbul. Having
Cool.
you as our very first guest, someone we deeply admired for years, makes this truly special for us.
Anyway, it's an honor for me as well to be the first guest.
Now I will hand things over to our moderator, Ipek.
So before starting, I hope you're doing okay. I hope your day is going good. I don't know if it's morning. It seems like it is the
Yeah,
morning for
it's
you.
about 10 a.m. over here. Yeah.
Great. I hope everything been great for you. It's a new week. Let's start it off strong.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Sounds great.
So
Yeah, everything's good over here so far. Yeah.
so nice to hear. Um, so let's just start with our first question. So, we have been collecting questions from the IGDA Istanbul community members, and so we have very nice questions waiting for us. And then, after I ask the questions that has been given to us from the community, we will then move on to Çağrı's and Emre's questions, and then we will have like a conversation type of environment. So, our first question. When you compose music around a specific theme or subject, how does your mind work? How are you able to build such a strong emotional connection to a theme or story and turn it into a musical piece?
Yeah, I think my process really begins with trying to figure out the musical palette for a particular project. So I kind of when we start a project, I'm looking at, well, what's the setting of the game? What's the game world like? And what are the sounds that I might associate with this place, or what are the instruments that you might expect to hear if you're in this place? What are the instruments people in this place might play, and what's the kind of music the characters in this game world might listen to themselves or create themselves? And so that tends to lead me to a lot of my instrument choices early on in a project. And for example, in Hades, it's takes place in a world of ancient Greek myth, right? But and I did a lot of research into sort of ancient Greek kind of instruments, and I put a pin in that and thought, well, I probably can't. It's going to be very challenging for me to compose for like aulos and like a five-string little lyre and stuff. So I was like, I'm gonna make it a little more modern and speak to kind of what I think of when I think of Mediterranean instruments and instruments from that part of the world. And part of that comes from the time I spent over there about 20 years ago. I visited Turkey. I was a space camp counselor in Izmir for a summer, and I got exposed to the balama and to some other Turkish instruments while I was there, the lavta, and when I was traveling in Greece and encountering the bouzouki and things like that. So I kind of decided when I was working on Hades, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go online and I'm gonna order all those various instruments and try to mess around with them and see what happens. And so those became an important part of the texture of the game for me. And I try to do a lot of my writing on those instruments for many of the pieces in the game. And so that's part of it. And then once I sort of have that component of the palette, I like to express other aspects of the tone of the game, right? So, for example, in Hades, okay, I've got that Mediterranean stuff. It takes place in hell, so I got to have some metal. So hard rock elements seemed to be just a no-brainer for me. And then also because of the ever-shifting nature of the underworld in our game and the way that everything sort of randomizes and remixes and keeps you on your toes, I wanted to incorporate some strange time signatures to reflect that. For me, when you have an odd time signature, it oftentimes has the feeling of sort of stumbling and tumbling forward and just kind of a little bit out of control, but and not understanding like where the next measure is going to begin sometimes, and that feeling can really, I think, reflect the experience of playing through a game where there's like randomized elements, you know. And so that was something to me that made a lot of sense. Um, Intellectually and then experientially felt pretty good once I started working on that stuff. So that was a component as well. And then I try to, once I have a couple of different things like that, I try to find a third thing to sort of triangulate everything and tie it all together in an interesting way or express another aspect of the tone. And for Hades, there's a bit of like, I feel like a slapstick element to roguelikes that are, it's kind of silly a little bit, you know? And especially our game, even though there's some serious subject matter and it's intense and stuff, and it does have a light tone to it. And, you know, there is silliness and there is a little bit of quirk in it. So the final sort of piece for me was this sort of theremin type sound that to me evokes like Halloween music, for lack of a better term, like sort of a little bit spooky, but in like a fun way. So that was sort of the final sort of piece for me that once I had those three elements, I sort of could triangulate what the music for the game was going to feel like, and it you know it goes to different places relative to that, but that for me was kind of the center that I arrived at.
Mhm. Actually, we wanted to ask questions about the bağlama
Hmm.
later on, but
Hmm.
since you brought it up, I want to keep on the conversation
Great.
on there.
Yeah.
So, we often hear the bağlama, a traditional Turkish instrument in your compositions. Is
Hmm.
there a particular reason why you choose to incorporate it into your music? You already mentioned the, Mediterranean
Right.
feel of the Hades game. But I also want to add, do you have a personal connection, like to the bağlama and how you came across it? Like, did you see it on the street one day and felt like, oh, this is so different. I wanna, you know, um, explore how this instrument plays.
Right. Yeah, I was so when during my time in Turkey, um I was looking around some sort of shop and saw one and picked it up and started messing around with it, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool and a different thing." And I recognized the sound of it from music that I had heard while I was in that region, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool. I really want it." So I bought one when I was there as a student, you know, 20 years ago, but then and I messed with it while I was there, and then I couldn't transport it home. Like I didn't have a way to get it back, so I just kind of left it there. um, and and then when I started, working on Hades, I thought, oh, I yes, this will work. I think this sound to me seems like something that'll be cool and evocative enough, and that I have a little bit of exposure to. So yeah, for me, it was that connection that I made when I was traveling in Turkey a long time ago, and discovered it that made it seem like the right choice for one of the ingredients for the soundtrack. Yeah.
It's like you come up with something, like you see something and you know, 20 years later, you're like, okay, wait, I can use this. This will be the perfect ingredients in my, recipe. It's so nice that you have such an experience like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I always feel like the more you travel, the more you can be exposed to different cultures and stuff, like just the, different music, different types of music, all that stuff. It's all beneficial to an artist, you know. It's like the more things you have to pull from, the sort of more options you have, you know.
Mhm. Moving on to our next question. Um, in story-driven projects like Supergiant's games, when shaping the emotional tone of the music, do you take inspiration primarily from the characters, the atmosphere, or the overarching emotional narrative?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all of the above, and it really depends on the specific piece. When I am writing a piece, I'm often thinking about the context. I'm always thinking about the context in which it's going to be used. And so certain pieces in Hades, for example, I know are going to be, this is going to occur during this region, and this section of it's going to play when you're fighting regular enemies in these chambers, and then I'm going to have this boss section that's more intense when you're fighting the boss, and I know it's this boss, so I want it to, reflect their character in some way. And so I'm thinking about all that stuff, and then sometimes I'll have pieces that I approach more as just character themes, where it's like this is the theme of this particular character, and I'm really trying to center it around their vibe and evoke something reflect something of their character in the piece specifically. And then if I'm writing pieces with lyrics, there's a lot of considerations there where it's like, of course, how will it occur in the game? Where will the player hear it? Um, but who wrote the song? Which of these characters has written the song? Where did this song come from? What's their perspective? You know, what's their style of lyricism? What's their, and trying to put myself in the position of that
Mhm.
character that is the composer of the piece, trying to write pieces as Orpheus, trying to write pieces as Eurydice, and see kind of what their different perspectives uh, evoke in me as a writer, and try to do my best to sort of write in a particular style.
Mhm. I see. Very interesting process. Like the mind behind the creative process is something that most people cannot relate to because,
Mm.
it's different for everyone. It's a personal process. So hearing everybody's stories is a eye-opening experience.
Cool.
Moving on, how can one build a productive collaboration with a musician, one that maintains creativity while also preserving the project's aesthetics?
Yes, it's an interesting question. I'm not positive that I'm qualified to answer it, because my experience mostly has just been as the audio director for Supergiant Games, and I employ myself to make all the music. So um, I'm part of the team, and I'm lucky enough to be in a position where we really have a lot of trust in each other creatively, and oftentimes whoever's in charge of a particular discipline, that's sort of their thing, and you get a lot of trust there. So I don't I often get to kind of do whatever I want.
Mhm.
And maybe there'll be some specific asks or requirements or notes or something, but in general, it's the way that we tend to work together as a studio is, it's highly collaborative in some ways, but it's also we have a lot of freedom, as sort of directors of our various disciplines, to kind of follow our hearts and do whatever we think is going to serve the project best. And I think part of that comes with just having worked together for so long. I mean, we've been doing this together. The original group of us that worked on Bastion is all still here, from 16 years ago. So the fact that we have enough sort of shared creative history to really just sort of understand, where we're all coming from, respectively, I think really, really helps. There's just a lot of creative trust, we have for each other.
I see. Well, next question.
Well,
Within the Supergiant team, to what extent are Greg Kasavin and other team members involved in the songwriting or sound design process? Does the creative process usually follow a predefined framework, or does it evolve more organically in a flow state?
yeah, I mean, I would say it's pretty organic, for me, and I would say that, as far as songwriting, I tend to do all that on my own, and Greg helps me come up with all the titles of the tracks once they exist.
Mhm.
So that's great. I'm glad I don't have to do that. And but yeah, I would say as far as the music writing goes and the songwriting goes, that's sort of me on my own, generally speaking. On this game, I have a couple of collaborators. Austin Wintry co-composed some tracks, the orchestral stuff with me on the project. And that was a lot of fun. Um, and I have some guest musicians and stuff. But for the most part, it's sort of that process is a solo process for me. Um, Greg really helps a lot in hooking up. He like does a lot of he hooks up some of the sounds once they exist, and does a lot of temp sound hookups, which helps me when I'm doing my audio pass later. So Greg tends to do a lot of that stuff, which is amazing. And um, and I'll often kind of discuss with Greg, like if I'm writing a song, I'll talk to him at the beginning about like, so what's the, what are we thinking as far as themes? What do we want to convey here? What's this, you know, I was thinking I had this idea for the song. And it should maybe be about this kind of a thing, and then we'll just have a sort of a broad discussion before I begin writing something, basically, like kind of a brainstorming session for, kind of what's the goal of this song, what's the sort of generally going to be about, and then I'll sort of go off and do my thing. So yeah, that's sort of generally how that works. And as far as the instrumental pieces go, it's more like, it sort of becomes clear when we're scoping out the game what is going to be needed where, and I'll, generally I'll talk to Greg about, well, I'm thinking we'll have, 2 to 4 pieces for this region of the game, and then 2 to 4, whatever it is here, and talk about priorities for if I have to make choices of, well, I was hoping to have 4 pieces for this region, but I only have 3, but I really want to do a character theme for this, like what's more important, and kind of weighing the choices of what to pursue. So, I'll talk to Greg about that stuff too.
Moving on.
Mhm.
For instance, if a musician who writes songs as part of a band wanted to transition into game music composition, what skills would they need to adapt or relearn? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically my path that I had was, I played in bands and I wrote songs, and my good childhood friend asked me, "Hey, do you want to make music for this video game?" And I was like, "Yeah, yes, I do," and that's how I got into it. So, um, the thing, the things I think that are really important transferable skills for me and the way that I like to work is music production skills are really important because it allows me to be this sort of one-stop shop. Like I don't need to pass it off to someone else to finish the piece. I go from idea to completed recording that goes in the game all by myself. Or a lot of the time I do, or most of the time. So I think that's part of what really helped, especially early on when we just didn't have the resources to I couldn't hire musicians. I can, there's nothing there. It was all, I was doing it real kind of bootstrap style on my own, Um, so I think the ability to take a musical idea from a thought to a finished, good sounding recorded piece of music, do that whole pipeline, is at least that's a skill that I really think took me a long way when I was starting out in particular. So I would say, yeah, practice mixing, practice, get comfortable with a DAW of your choice, whatever it is. I use Logic Pro and I love that, but you know, everybody's got their own comfort zone, and I would say like leaning into your strengths is probably a good idea. I had never really composed as a composer. I mean, I'd done a tiny little bit for a friend's short film or whatever one time, a couple little pieces here and there, but nothing really. Um, I didn't study composition. I don't have you know, that's not where I'm coming from. I'm coming from songwriting. So approaching my compositions like songs that's how I approach them. I still do it. And so just using my comfort and understanding of songwriting and my comfort with and understanding of songwriting, I think was a really important part of me feeling confident enough to do this and then to be able to sort of execute it in my own way. I think that stuff was really valuable as well.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Next question.
Mhm.
Among all your compositions for Supergiant, which one holds the most personal or emotional significance for you?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, there's a few. I think Setting Sail Coming Home from Bastion for me was one that I just like. I had the idea to do it where I'd write these 2 songs and then combine them and have them sort of interweave with each other. Um, and it was a thing I'd wanted to do, like from when I wrote Build That Wall. I was like, oh, I wanna try and do this thing, that it's an idea that I stole from a musical theater where, oftentimes there'll be like two separate songs that don't seem related, and then they sing them together, and they're sort of, it turns out, oh, they work together. And so having that moment, I thought would be a real fun thing to try. And when I finally got to do it and felt like I was able to execute it to my satisfaction, I was really pleased, and just relieved mostly. Um, and so that was great. And then there have been, for me, there's been significant pieces on every project that I really feel like, oh, this is the piece that I wrote that really identified the sound of the game for me, or was like, it felt like a breakthrough, or this is one where I tried something I'd never tried before, and was able to achieve something that I didn't know whether or not I could do. That kind of stuff's always really satisfying for me. And I think on the on Hades 2, there's a lot of tracks like that. I mean, I really loved writing Bewitching Eyes. That was so fun. Um, because I got to write an 80s power ballad, and I'd never, it's like I love those, and I have never had a professional reason to do that before. So the fact that I had an opportunity to do that was really lovely, and it was so much fun to write, and it came out like really quickly. Like I just sort of, I just arrived there quickly, and that always feels great. It feels great to struggle and finish something, and it also feels great when you don't struggle and you finish something, that you're happy with. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. And then of course, getting to work with Lewis Cole on The End of Time was unbelievable. He's one of my favorite musicians alive, and co-composing tracks with Austin Wintory and recording a full orchestra at Abbey Road Studio One, which was, a total mind-blowing experience as well. So yeah, there have been just a lot of wonderful things like that over the course of the last 16 years.
Wow. It's a long process, 16
Yeah.
years. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even before that, you've been also like, everything that you've been collecting, you've been living through has been giving you inspiration in one way or another throughout your next project. So it's not only a 16 years of, working, it's also all of your years of living actually, is projected onto your work. So, yeah. So, next question. In mythologically themed project like the Hades series, where are where there are certain cultural and stylistic boundaries, how does the creative process differ compared to working on a more abstract conceptual worlds like Transistor or Bastion?
It's an interesting question, because for me, I really like and embrace boundaries and constraints. And I love that. And I always, if I don't have them from some sort of external source, I like to set them up for myself. And that's part of what I was talking about earlier about finding those different sort of pillars of what the sound of the game is going to be. Those to me are that it's sort of like setting up the constraints, like what is the what are the boundaries here? And I can always push those and I can explore outside of them, but finding a place to sort of, this is the center and I can explore from here, is really helpful for me. So it actually didn't feel different for me than my process on the other projects because, while I did look at, sort of traditionally ancient Greek sounds and stuff like that, like I looked at that stuff, but I was like, okay, noted, but I'm going to do a different thing for creative reasons because I just feel, I don't feel like I'll be able to execute that properly. So, so to me, the process was actually very, very similar, where I set up these sort of creative parameters for myself and just sort of generally, I really find that super helpful. I like to use the analogy of, it's so much easier if someone asks you to write a sonnet, which has these stiff constraints, than if somebody says, write a poem, because it's just like, well, then you're paralyzed by all the options that you have. You have no, but if there's something channeling you in a particular direction, it's much easier to just start going. It's like, well, I know I have to rhyme. This is the rhyme scheme, and I only have 14 lines I have to fill, and I have this and that, whatever. Um, so I really value those constraints and find it much, much, much easier to work with constraints. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Next up is our last question from the community. Then we will move on to the next section. We've noticed that Hades 2 features collaborations with other artists and composers. How has this expansion of the studio's audio department affected the creative process? As the audio director, what challenges have you encountered while managing this growth?
Yeah, it's been awesome, and for the most part, it hasn't really changed the creative process. I mean, working with the sort of guest musicians and stuff, that stuff has been very seamless, and I just sort of do the thing, and I send them, the thing I'm looking for, and they send me back a thing that's awesome, and that's pretty much how that went. And working with Austin, that's probably the biggest change because I've never co-composed stuff for games before. I've co-written songs and things, but so that was really a delightful process too, and working with Austin was very seamless, and I'd generate an idea and I'd send it to him, and here's what I'm thinking. This is here's like some section ideas. Like I'm thinking this kind of riff would be for this section, and then we'd go to here, and then and then he sends me back a thing that's more fleshed out with orchestra and maybe an additional section to kind of transition and all sorts of stuff, and we'd send things back and forth a few times, and yeah, that process was awesome. I mean, it was so much fun, and it to me it actually was like it was really nice because the pressure of doing something all by yourself, it's just nice to have a creative sounding board and somebody to collaborate with, and that way it was really fun. And then the biggest difference for me actually is I tend to serially finish pieces. Like I'll record, I'll perform, I'll mix a piece, and it'll be done, and I'll move on to the next one. And to prepare for our orchestral session at Abbey Road, we were preparing about 45 minutes of music that had to be like in a state that I wasn't used to, which is kind of half finished, where you've written it, but you haven't recorded it. You have these mock-ups, these orchestral mock-ups, but it's not fully representative of what it's going to sound like, and it's not mixed, and it's not. So I had to like half finish a lot of pieces in a way that I'm not used to doing. And I had to have them in that state for months. But then all at once, I had 7 or 8 finished pieces or whatever at the end. So, you know what I mean? So it was a very different, just a very different experience for me. And that, induced a little bit of anxiety in me, but it was fine. And it ended up being a lot of fun.
I mean, stepping out of the comfort zone is always so scary, but it feels so
Yeah.
rewarding in the end, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly.
So, next up, Emre and Çağrı will ask their own questions and we'll have like a conversation like environment. So,
Mhm.
whoever wants to go first can introduce themselves and, start this section.
Mhm.
Hi, Darren, by the way. It's very nice to have you here again. And I'm Çağrı. I'm a sound designer. And I can say that I am looking for currently transitioning my focus from technical work to audio direction, as I'm a better networker than a sound designer and musician, I think.
Mhm.
And my question is mostly like focused on the social and the leadership aspects of your role.
Mhm.
The first question is a little, maybe you covered when Ipek asked about it, but like also maybe we can find something else more. Like in every Supergiant game, like feels distinct in genre and atmosphere, but they all are recognizable somehow. And I'm very curious about socially, how do you go about defining this unique aesthetic when starting a new project? And like, how do you standardize this vision without stifling the team's creative autonomy?
Right. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I kind of spoke to how I settle on those decisions earlier about, I'll choose aspects of the tone that I want to reflect with the palette and all this other stuff. But what's interesting is, so I am the audio director, but there's nobody else, other audio people here. So it's me, and I direct myself to write in a particular style. So I have some collaborators that I work with, but I haven't really had the task of communicating my specific tonal ideas to other composers or sound designers or anything like that. Because for the most part, I tend to do all that stuff myself. I mean, we had a little bit of external help on Transistor with some sound design stuff. Um, when I had a kid in the middle of production and I had to take some time off. So, and then of course I worked with Austin on co-composing some songs for this game. But it's one of those things where I felt like I didn't really have a struggle to communicate the tone of what we were going for in those cases. It felt based on the stuff that I generated already and the description of what I was looking for and what we were shooting for. That it didn't feel like a struggle. It felt pretty natural and I think as long as you sort of have a trajectory that you're aiming towards and a place you're coming from, it can be kind of, it seems like, oh, there's a point A and a point B, and how we can get there however we want, as long as we sort of aim at that, then that I think that can be really helpful if you have sort of the proof of concept and whatever you're sort of aiming to achieve relative to that. I think that can really help.
Thank you for answering it.
Mhm.
And I can move on with another question. This is my last question, by the way.
Mhm.
Like, Supergiant Games has historically made like tight-knit core team,
Mhm.
and when looking expand, as you look towards potential future projects or expanding the complexity of the soundscape, like in Hades 2, how do you approach talent scouting or headhunting for new audio collaborators, for other musicians, or for the people who you want to work together?
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky enough to be in a position where I could reach out to somebody I admired personally and I loved their work, and I was already a fan of what they did, and on Hades 2 in particular, I was able to just kind of reach out, and and when I haven't had a specific person in mind, but I knew what I was looking for, my friend Mason Lieberman, uh, I is a guy who just I've asked him. He's the guy who found the both incredible guitar players for the Unseen Ones in Hades. He hooked me up with the incredible flautist for Hades 2 that I worked with. He's Josh Plotner, and he hooked me up uh, with Pau Figueres for the flamenco guitar. I mean, he just like he just knows, and he hooked me up with Lewis Cole's manager. He just like knows everybody somehow. So and he's like, oh, I know the right person for this, and he's just been 100% correct every time. So luckily, I haven't really had to struggle with any of that stuff. Uh, and Austin and I have collaborated in other ways. Like he's done arrangements for me, and we've worked together on some other stuff before, and we've done concerts together. And I was just excited about the idea of collaborating with Austin in this way, in a more direct, collaborative way, and that just seemed like a natural fit. We're friends for a long time. We've worked together in very similar capacities, but not quite that way. So it just seemed like a clear path to me.
Thanks a lot.
Mhm.
That's all from me.
Darren, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm Emre, a music composer from a studio called Ubik Studios. First of all, I want to thank you personally because I'm not a classically trained composer like you. I was in a band. And
Mhm.
when Bastion came out, you were one of the main reasons that I was like, okay, I can do this. I want to do this kind of stuff. And throughout this, how, 10 or something years, I always look to you as a reference point throughout my career. So I'm generally grateful for all the work you've done. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. That's very kind of you.
So my first question is, I guess it's answered. I wanted to ask, like, how did you come up with the idea with creating a genre with blending stuff, not just like doing one genre itself?
Right.
For example, you said for the Bastion in another YouTube video, like acoustic frontier trip hop,
Mhm.
And for Transistor, you said what? Old world electronic post-rock. So
Mhm.
why and how did you come up with that trifecta you mentioned earlier for the Hades? Why did you
Yeah.
decided to do that? Yeah.
So my original thought when I was working on Bastion was because I don't have training as a composer and I didn't really have other tools to feel like I had the tools to achieve a sort of unified soundtrack by maybe more traditional means. I thought, well, if I set up a style of music, a genre that will connect everything here, then I'll feel that the music is connected enough to itself, that it'll be all tied together in a way that maybe isn't a traditional way to do that from a
Yeah.
composition standpoint, but that was sort of my thought process there is if I make music that sounds like it could all be on an album together, then that's going to be enough to tie it all together. And it was my hope. So, and it'll give me those parameters. And like I mentioned earlier, I really appreciate having those creative parameters. So it was partially functional, and it was partially um, just sort of uh, basically the way that I thought I could succeed at this. Maybe you know what I mean? Was like it was just a theory about maybe this will work for me and it's I've kind of stuck with that and I've gone on soundtracks later on. I've gone a little bit further afield of the sort of central idea, and that's okay. Like for me, I see it as just like a tonal center, and then I can explore outside of it if necessary, if it makes sense. But I try to have everything be kind of related to that central sonic idea. And then um, you asked another part of that question that I really wanted to answer. Can you repeat just the summary of that one more time?
I can try. Why and how did you come up with this
Yeah.
creating genre, this
Yes.
trifecta?
Yeah. Yeah. And so um, and the way I came up with it
Yeah.
was based on the various pillars of the sort of tone of the game that I tried to describe earlier, right? It's like um, I have the setting of the world and what kind of instruments might you expect to hear in this place and what instruments might the people play, and then what's something that's expressive, like for Bastion, right? You have the sort of frontiersy elements
Yeah.
because it's got a kind of a Western vibe, but it's got this sort of fantasy, this sort of like exotic fantasy setting. So the frontier aspect is sort of what sounds that to me at the time were sort of exotic sounds, which are just sort of world music sounds was kind of how that manifested. And then the trip hop stuff was something for me to sort of triangulate those two things and combine them together. And and
Why?
right,
I
and
really like the trip hop aspect. It's the
yeah,
best, I think, and I'm genuinely curious why that ties them
right,
so well.
right. So my theory was for creating a new genre is I want to put you in a unique place
Yeah.
with and you can take your associations from all the components and bring them here. But when you combine it all together, the idea is that it's going to be a unique experience and for this unique setting. And so, really, it was part of the goal was just to express the uniqueness of the place and to have a genre that is one that I hadn't heard before. That the hope is that it's going to bring you to somewhere new that you haven't been. That's sort of the idea, right? It's like
Okay, so
to
the third pillar is like a curveball,
say
and
it one
you
more time.
the third pillar is like a curveball to the first and the second pillar, so that in a hope that it can all tie together.
Yeah, I mean, it could be seen as a curveball, or it could be seen as like, for me, it's the specifically having the sort of three main components allows me to a little bit more freedom to try to combine things in a way that you maybe haven't heard specifically. Um, I feel like if you took any two things, you've probably heard that before. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay,
Any
yeah,
a
yeah.
combination of any two things. But then that third thing makes it just, that you can triangulate it in such a way that you're able to create something that feels fresh hopefully. Even though it's got all sorts of influences and you bring with you your associations with all the different styles or but that's part of the thing I'm trying to use too, is I'm trying to use your associations and my associations with those elements to help evoke different aspects of the tone of this place, right? So yeah, it's a combination of taking my preconceived sort of associations with these different styles and these different sounds and whatever that means to me and what I hope it might mean to a listener and a player, and also put you in a new place by combining stuff in a way you maybe haven't heard exactly. So it can feel unique, it can feel more immersive, and it can help all the while trying to evoke the specific tone of this place and immerse you in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's the main thing. I don't know if there's anything else I wanted to say. But thank you for the question. I liked answering that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, then I will. Okay, let's ask that. This seems related. Um, I too like to limit myself
Mhm.
when composing for games because, like I said, I idolize you, and I'm in a band, and it's really easy when you have the exact lineup. Like we have two guitars, we have a keyboard, we have bass.
Right,
So yeah,
right,
I compose for that. I don't
right,
compose for flutists or violins
right,
or stuff like that. Yeah,
right.
so I like that too. But I found out that I struggle to write music for myself, for my
Yeah,
enjoyment
right.
nowadays. And I wanted to ask, have you come with something like that? Do you experience stuff like that, or can you
Yeah.
write music for yourself still?
Yeah, I mean, you mean like writing music for the like outside of games, you
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I try to do it when I can. I don't have a lot of bandwidth these days, but I have a, side project band that I'll get together with every couple of years and we'll do a thing, and my approach to that stuff is really free now that I don't feel the pressure to like try to write hits or whatever. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to like make it with my band, and I think that is really really delightful. I have a project with some friends who everybody plays everything. We all switch off. We all write songs. We've all been in a lot of bands and stuff. So it's a trio, and it's very. We like to play a lot of games when we write, where sometimes we would get together and jam. And when we all lived in the same city, now we're all spread all over the world. But we'd get together and we would do an exercise where it's like, okay, we're gonna write something, and the drummer is responsible for the guitar part, and the guitarist is responsible for the bass part, and the bassist is responsible for the drum part, and you have to tell the other person what to play, and you can't like say no. You just have to play that. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like, so there's like, if the part sucks, it's not your fault. It's totally fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
that's great.
so all sorts of just finding ways to make that fun, or sometimes we'd have like a list of parameters, right? And we'd say, okay, we want to write a song where the A section and the B section are in different time signatures, and that's the assignment, right? Or we wrote a song once, and part of the goal was we want to do a thing where it's um every measure is like one beat shorter than the
Oh,
last one. So it's like eight, and then
wow.
it's seven, and then it's six, and then it's five, and so it has this like spiraling down a drain
Yeah.
feeling. So just little exercises like that really help in writing, especially if you're not too worried about trying to make a hit. Then it's just like, oh well, this is just to have fun and express yourself creatively. And so, yeah, I mean, I find that stuff when I have the opportunity to do it, I really love doing it, and it's always a great opportunity to sort of flex different muscles, stretch out a little bit, and do something, like a little sorbet between courses. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
A little palate cleanser.
exactly.
So yeah, I like doing that stuff.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Can I keep going on with my questions, by the way? Is everyone
Of course.
okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Let's ask that then. When you work with orchestral mockups, as a perfectionist like you, that you had to hear the exact thing before deciding, yes, this is what we will record. Did you struggle with that bit? Because everyone says that I'm sure that you come up with that. This will sound better live. This orchestra will sound better
Right.
live, and you
Right.
just gotta know it because it's maybe the dynamics will be different, and I know you can make those changes while recording. But did you had any problems with that recording the orchestra versus the mock-ups situation?
I had enough faith in Austin at this point after having worked with him long enough that like I understood that because we've done some other projects. We've done that concert together,
Yeah.
the sort of live concert
The
thing.
Super Genius thing for games, the Abroad live. Yeah.
Yeah, so we did in 2019 we did like a 10-year anniversary thing concert with a chamber orchestra, and we did a bunch of arrangements for that, and those all had mock-ups, and Ashley and I rehearsed with the mock-ups, and then we played with the live orchestra, and all that stuff, and then we recorded the album songs of Supergiant, and so we had that whole experience, and I worked with him on a couple of tracks on the original Hades, in the Blood, as well as on the Coast.
Oh, okay.
To do those arrangements and with a chamber orchestra, and experience the process of hearing the mock-ups, understanding like this will be different. It'll be and I had the experience of hearing the mock-ups for the concert, having it played live, understanding the differences, understanding the nuance of how that works, and so it gave me the confidence and the sort of faith in the process that I was working with Austin, who just does this all the time. That's his main type of thing that he does. And so, yeah, there's definitely some trust there, but you know, my sort of working relationship with Austin allowed me to sort of let go of as much of that as I could, because we'd had such great experiences working together before. So it's like I trust him. He knows what he's doing. He's a pro at this specific thing. So, I'm gonna let go of the anxiety around that as much as I can.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, he's great, by the way. I love his work.
Yeah.
Okay then. Okay, I wanna ask some question about the music design, the interactive design of the music, because I love the planning phase on Transistor, which is
Mm,
I guess it's in my top five all favorite games
mm,
of all time, to
mm,
Transistor. Um, like the layering stuff, the
mhm.
filtering and the drums go off and stuff like that, or the bass line stays when you clear the room in Hades. That's
Right.
such a genius touch, might I say, because
Oh, thanks.
it's like when you run a sprint and you're just catching your breath. The thing is done, but you're not fully yourself. You're just
Right.
catching your breath. That feeling is, I don't know, I love it.
Yeah.
So how do you approach the music design, or when do you approach the music design when you're working on the project? And how is your general philosophy for that?
Yeah, I think for Transistor, it's unique to the project, and it's unique to the scenario in which the music will be playing back, and what the player will be doing, and how they're going to be experiencing it. And there's a lot of considerations there. For Transistor, I knew that the planning phase, I wanted to feel really different because everything pauses. Red can't speak, but you're in her head, right? And she's a singer, and she's gonna have music going. She's gonna be, so that was sort of it's such a part of her identity. So I thought the humming when she's in her head, sort of planning out her next move and sort of muffling the music and doing that stuff, um, was gonna be, for me, it just seemed like a cool opportunity to do something that would pull you into the character and really differentiate the sort of real-time mode from the planning mode, in the case of Transistor. And as far as for Hades and the way that stuff works with the different stems, part of the rationale behind that, it serves a bunch of purposes, right? One of the main ones is there's this game, and it's got like maybe 2.5 hours of music in it, and the player can be playing this for like in theory, like hundreds of hours, and I was trying to find a way to delay as long as possible the player getting sick of the music, try to give it as much life as I possibly could. And so one way that I thought that might help with that is sort of randomizing the way in which you hear the music, kind of to some degree. So the way we ended up implementing that was there's certain aspects, certain areas where you always hear the same music, and it's kind of in the same way, like right when you start a run, and there's certain, types of things that are the same character themes and all that stuff. The shop, when you get to the shop. But part of the idea was, whenever you kill the last enemy, the drums turn off. That's we tried and true. That's good. Back to Transistor, we did that too. And it's like, yeah, it's intense when the drums are on, less intense when the drums are off. And of course, there are some exceptions to this, but that was a sort of general rule we knew we wanted to do for Hades. And then I have a guitar stem and a bass stem in addition to that. And whenever you enter a new chamber, the drums turn on, and those other stems will do a random remix, basically. It'll, in some combination randomly, it'll either play just the bass, at bass and the drums, or it'll play just the drums, or it'll play the bass, drums, and guitar, or, some combination of that, right? And then when the drums turn off, you're hearing whatever's left, you know? And so that's why sometimes you're just hearing the bass grooving, by itself or whatever it is, and so not only does it help reflect the nature of the experience you're having gameplay wise, it helps extend the life of those pieces so that you're never really hearing it play back exactly the same way on subsequent runs. So that in theory, the time between you beginning to hear it and then getting sick of it is longer,
Yeah, did a great job. I don't heard of anyone that's sick of the Hades OCT. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, for my last question, I wanna ask a question about the voice acting
No.
because I'm really curious. Was that something you always wanted to do? Was that some sort of an author experiment? Like, yeah, I will do the voice acting as well. Like, or was it something like a perfectionist way? Like, I want Zagreus to sound exactly like this, or yeah, what was the journey there?
Well, so specifically for Zagreus, you mean?
Yeah, in
Yeah.
general, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, so I mean, in general, as far as the voice acting goes, we when I was working on Bastion, I was, signed up to do the music, and I was doing the sound design, which I'd never done before. I was learning and I was doing that. And we were experimenting with ways to communicate the narrative in Bastion. And we tried like walls of text, and we tried other stuff, and we tried whatever, and my good friend and roommate at the time, Logan Cunningham, you know, we thought, oh, maybe there's an opportunity here to record Logan and see, if we maybe, narration. I'm not sure how the narration idea specifically came up. It was maybe Greg or somebody came up with it, and we did a test to see if that was promising. And as soon as we did it, we're like, yeah, this seems cool. Let's keep doing that, and have the narrator respond to the stuff you're doing, and all that stuff, and add reactivity that way, and all that. So the voice acting began there, and it's been an essential part of what we've done since. And Logan Cunningham has been there every step of the way for that. And I've directed, every single VO session that we've had for all the games. And with each game, we've expanded our cast a little bit, and I have a acting background. I grew up doing musical theater and stuff, and improv in high school and all that. And I thought before I got into music labs, maybe that's what I wanted to do. Um, Something in making movies or something like that. I'd done some of that stuff for fun in high school and a little bit in college. And when I and so yeah, each project our cast grows a little bit, and we'd reach out to like sort of friends of friends, or who do we know, what's our network of people we can tap to work on this. And that kind of got bigger and bigger. And in Pyre, I did a little bit of voice acting. We had a big cast in that game, and our cat and it kind of grew um, as big as our network could. And and then by the time we got to Hades, we reached out to like a handful of people outside of our circle. And then Hades 2, we went a little even wider. But as far as Zagreus goes, we had a thing in mind for what we wanted from the protagonist, and I think Greg and Jen and several of us had sort of a thought about what he should sound like, and we had some auditions, and none of them were exactly what we were kind of shooting for, and I was like, well, let me just try. I have a thought about what he might, kind of what I imagine he might sound like. Let me just give it a shot and see if I can, do something that expresses the vibe that we're going for here a little bit. And I did a test for Zagreus, some scratch VO, and we put it in the game, and everybody liked it. So it's like, okay, well, I guess we'll just keep this in until we replace him later and with a real actor, and then I kept recording more and more and more and more. And eventually I was like, oh, I guess I'm doing this. I guess it's me. So that's sort of how Zagreus came about, was just, really just trying to express the idea that we had for this character, and it luckily it came across well enough that's just, we ended up just keeping it.
Okay. Okay, then one last question, because you talked about Pyre, and I'm really curious about your ideas.
Mhm.
Why do you think the Pyre went on the radar? Because I
Under the
liked
ra-
it.
yeah, no, I think I really love Pyre. I think it's a super cool
Yeah.
game. It's definitely, like, I think the strangest of our games, and if you have like a Venn diagram of the people who like kind of like actiony sports games, and then people who like, kind of like visual novel style games, I think the overlapping sliver may not, it's not like the one big circle. It's like,
Yeah,
so
there's just a
so
bunch of us. Yeah.
right. So it's I think it maybe has, because it had pulls from, a couple of different worlds. I think that maybe has some you know maybe limits the appeal. It's not, and it requires a lot of reading from you, and not everybody's into that. If they're playing a video game, it's all, totally understandable. So, but yeah, I mean, that game was really fun to work on. I loved working on it, and I thought the music for that was really fun to make, and a big challenge too, because of all the interactive stuff I was experimenting
Yeah,
with during that
branching.
game.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, so there are a lot of challenges, and I learned a ton from working on that game. So yeah, that one, it's got a special place, but I think it has a smaller audience, I think, than the other games, for a variety of reasons. But I still really really dig it.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, thank you, Darren, for
Yeah.
answering.
Hmm.
Well then, if we don't have any more further questions, Shari, do you
I
have?
have one more
Okay,
question.
great.
By the way, while Emre asking about the music,
Hmm.
uh, his question just brought another one into my mind. By the way, the voiceovers in the Hades are completely, like gives goosebumps to us, and
Hmm.
it wouldn't be the same game without these
Right.
voiceovers. Because like when when I think most of the people playing, they feel like there's a story going on, it's another game, and there's a grinding going on, it's another
Hmm.
game.
Right.
And it's, like really like fantastic for us. My question is, nowadays I'm questioning this, and it's somehow a contradiction
Hmm.
for me. Like,
Hmm.
while you are composing or designing sound for the games, uh, or why I'm designing or composing for the games, I ask to myself, like, am I telling my story, or have I been lost in this fantasy world? Like,
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, so is a question like, how do I balance expressing my things I personally
yeah,
want to express with sort of serving the game? Yeah, I mean, I think, it's one of those things where I haven't had trouble finding gratification in expressing myself through the constraints of the games that I've worked on. You know what I mean? I really feel gratified doing that, because I feel like the way I approach it is still, it's all music I want to make. It's all music that I'm happy to be making. I'm not making anything. There are no pieces that I'm making that I'm like not stoked to be making. So to me, it's like that's part of that's the sort of hidden fourth pillar is I have to like it, you know? Those three other things I mentioned, and then I need to like it. That's the last part. So um because it's like, you work on these games for a long time. We worked on Hades 2 for 4.5 years, and if I weren't stoked to be working on it, it'd get old, you know? But luckily I'm happy. Um I'm thrilled every time I get to make a new piece of music. I'm excited to dive in, just because it's there's some aspect of it to me that's really exciting, no matter what.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Any final words, anyone? Emre, Çağrı, anything you want to add finally before we close off?
We can add our giant thanks.
Yeah, this opportunity has been very valuable. So thank you so much for spending your precious time for this event. Having such a topic at hand, game audio is, especially from what I see as a game design student, is that it is not something that's been touched on most of the time.
Mm.
So having events that are solely based on this is so valuable to the people in the industry that are, specializing in game audio or audio
Right.
in general. So again, thank you very, very much for this opportunity.
Yeah, my
Um,
pleasure. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Before closing off, maybe as a fun little thing, do you have any favorite quote or like any quote at all that you would want to share from Zagreus himself, like, as a little closing off?
Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Any favorite quote you're saying?
Yeah, from Zagreus as Zagreus from, Hades.
Zagreus? Oh, geez. Um, Gosh, I'm trying to think. What's my favorite Zagreus line? I have favorite Skelly lines that are readily accessible, but Zagreus, yeah, no, he's just no, he's. I like when he panics. That's fun, you know. When he's sort of quippy and panicky, those are fun times. I like his whole relationship with the Bone Hydra too. He starts calling her Lerny eventually. That's fun too. Um, but yeah, as far as favorite lines, um, gosh, there's stuff from. I really like when Skelly goes ham and just is big and ridiculous. That's fun. And actually, I think my favorite stuff I got to do as Narcissus in Hades 2 was super fun. That stuff was a delight. Just doing the sort of trying to turn things into one-liners that aren't one-liners, and stuff like that. I like you as a friend, like that kind of stuff was super fun.
Well, thank you very much for everything, for
Yeah.
this, for spending your morning with us. It's been very valuable, as I mentioned, and we can close off this speech, this event here.